If coming home no longer brings you joy, then you're going to want to listen to the show to figure out whether or not it's time to make a move. Is this the time?
And we're not talking about spouses here. We're talking about houses.
Yeah, we are talking about houses.
If coming home doesn't bring you joy, we're talking about housing problems, not spousing problems.
This is true. And I'm Yetta Dekker.
I'm Ken Dekker.
And this is the Inside Track, where we're going to explore what are the signs if it is time to make a move.
And I thought we'd stir the pot this time, change it up a little bit. You know what I mean?
Oh, I do.
I'm here to stir your soul a little bit. But really what we're talking about is our journey. Mm-hmm. We've moved several times.
Yep. And owned a lot of real estate.
We have owned a lot of real estate and still own a lot of real estate.
Yep.
But right now I'm talking about where we live.
Yes.
And there's been reasons that we moved. And so I thought if we take you on our journey that we got married. How old were we? 19. Turned 20 on a honeymoon.
You did. I didn't.
Yeah, I did. You're younger. Significantly.
So the idea is that as we're sharing where we've been, where we've lived, and why we moved each time, we realized that pretty much all the reasons somebody would make a move are incorporated into the journey over the last 36 years, 37 years.
Except for our future move.
Except that one. That one hasn't taken place yet. So those reasons for moving have not yet happened. And so what we're hoping is that you're going to see yourself somewhere in the story and go, that's what's going on. Why I'm not joyful or thrilled to come home to the home that I'm coming home to anymore.
Or maybe you are.
Or maybe you are
full of joy and it's perfect for you right now.
Right.
And there will be a day, some point in your future, where your home doesn't fit your lifestyle anymore.
Right. It doesn't fit who you are anymore. It doesn't fit your family makeup. It just doesn't work as well as it used to. And so when that happens, how will you know what the signs are if you don't know what you're looking for? So the idea of this is just, let's figure out what you're looking for, and then you maybe don't agonize as long about whether do I move or don't I move.
Mm-hmm. And when we first started out, it's interesting. When you first get married, there's a lot of stuff you think you need.
Yeah, at least for us. And maybe you were way wiser than us, and you never thought you needed all this stuff. We had to go through the journey of thinking we needed all the stuff.
Well, it was kind of important to have a bed to sleep in, although we could have slept on the floor.
Okay, but we didn't just buy a bed.
We didn't?
No, we bought lots of other things on what you call credit. And so often when I hear somebody say they're house poor because they own a home and they have a mortgage and they're paying taxes and heat and hydro, and they're saying they're house poor often, and not always, often, and certainly was the case for us, when we actually look at the reality of the financial situation, and ours as an example, there was way more money going out to consumer debt, unnecessary spending, or leisure spending than really we had imagined. And if we had simply eliminated those expenses, we wouldn't have felt house poor at all. So is it debt poor or is it house poor? And for us, unfortunately, it was debt poor.
Yeah, especially since we didn't own a house yet.
At that point. Mm-hmm.
So that's the first reason for moving.
Right.
For us was, we were in a small apartment. Well, actually, we went from a 1-bedroom to a 2-bedroom because we got too much stuff.
Yeah.
And then from the 2-bedroom, we were expecting a child, and we decided to move to a 3-bedroom garden home.
Right. And so the rent went up.
Because we were still renting. Mm-hmm. And I started calculating what we'd spent in rent over the previous number of years, 4 or 5 years. And it was like $50,000 back 30 years ago. Closer, or more.
Yeah.
And we decided enough was enough and it was time to buy our first house.
and pay ourselves rather than pay somebody else's mortgage off. Because if you do the calculations, unless you're living in very small space, then potentially if you're in a bachelor apartment or you're renting a room, then your rental expenses are much lower than your housing expenses. Like if you were to own a mortgage or own a house, which then has a mortgage, so you kind of own the mortgage too. Unfortunately, when you think about the cost of rent, if you compare it to the cost of owning that home, they're very similar.
If you're going from the same type of property to the same type of property. So what we did was we moved from the garden home, 3-bedroom garden home, to a 3-bedroom townhome.
Right.
Both still no garage.
Right. Both without a garage, both 3 bedrooms, both 1 bath on the second floor and a powder room on the main level. So very similar in utility. And I believe, if my memory is correct, our expenses actually went down because we moved to Quebec. We decided to buy an inexpensive piece of real estate. It was about a $30,000 difference at the time, whether we had bought in Ontario or whether we had bought in Quebec. So we bought in Quebec.
Yeah, and actually we did almost buy a house in Ontario that
we did.
Would have been a money pit.
Yeah.
And it was a good thing that we didn't.
Right.
Now, one thing with moving to Elmer was a good first step. And we had to buy not necessarily because we couldn't afford the payment. We hadn't built up the down payment was the issue because we had a consumerism diet. We like to buy clothing and cars.
I don't even know what we bought at high interest rates because it's all gone now. Like it's not like we own any of that stuff anymore. The clothes doesn't fit. It's worn out. And even the children's stuff we bought, now we have grandchildren, never mind little children. And the cars have broken a long time ago. So and even the furniture that we bought on credit.
I think the Tonka truck survived.
I think
it went to the next generation, the Tonka toys.
Okay, so $200 of the stuff, the consumerism, survived. The rest of it didn't. So that's kind of something to think about when you're going, is it time to make a move? Can I reduce my consumerism and increase putting it into something that's actually going to increase in value?
That's a big change. And I think that sometimes if we're honest with ourselves, if you're renting now, it may be because renting is the right thing for you.
It may.
And it may be that you're in a transition period and renting fits because it's transient, so to speak. It's easy to change rather than purchasing. And it may be even that you're at the end of your ownership cycle and renting's the right thing for you now. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with renting unless you have a desire to build wealth and renting's holding you back from that.
Right, or it's costing you more to rent than it would be to own.
Yeah, and again, you got to save up the down payment, which today is 5%.
Right.
So on a $200,000 condo, you're talking $10,000. If you're talking a $400,000 townhome, you're talking, what is that? $420,000. Yeah.
Plus closing costs. So you really want to budget
25 or so.
Yeah, you want to budget another couple of percent of the value of the home for closing costs between legal fees, even 5%. Almost, it depends on the price range of the property because your legal fees really don't change whether you're buying an expensive home or a lower priced home. Land transfer tax changes. So there's just those closing costs, maybe appraisal fees, building inspection fees. If you're buying in the country, there's maybe septic inspections and well inspections. Maybe there's environmental inspections. So there just needs to be some additional funds set aside for all of those closing costs. When we say 5% down, you're still almost saving probably closer to 8 to 10%, depending on the value of the home, to cover all of those closing costs. Just
now,
an
one nice thing
awareness.
is if it's your first time you've ever bought a property, there is a rebate on some of the land transfer tax up to $2,000.
Right. So there's little things to assist if it's your first house. So the reason for that, what we want to think about is why. Well, rather than paying somebody else's money, it was somebody else's mortgage, it was time to pay our own. Our expenses were actually going to go down rather than up. We didn't have enough, well, we had enough space, except it wasn't our own space. So we didn't have the ability to make it our own. We couldn't customize it. We couldn't build equity. So those were great reasons to move that first time.
And then we didn't stay there that long.
We didn't, because part of what we hadn't calculated. So I wish in hindsight we'd had a little more expert input and counsel from even somebody in the real estate industry, or an accountant, somebody that could have told us that the extra taxes that we'd be paying by working in Ontario and living in Quebec would outweigh some of the benefits of having purchased a lower priced property. A little less expensive, except our personal tax was a lot higher and our commute was higher than it would have been had we simply bought in Ontario. So we moved the second time really to eliminate some costs, even though we were going to buy a more expensive home.
That was the impetus on our decision.
Right.
And yet, where would we move to became a big issue. And we were actually driving one time, because I was working at the time at Bank and Walkley area, and coming from Elmer to Bank and Walkley was a hike. You had to go across that bridge, and it's not any better than it was back then.
It is better.
The traffic's better going across the bridge?
There's more lanes.
Well, maybe, but it's not very good at rush hour. And then I had to come all the way across the city, so it was taking like 45 minutes. So it started to be a long commute as well. Right. And one day we were at work, I was at work, and somebody said they were living in Osgood and I should check it out. So we went for a drive.
Yeah, and I thought he was crazy. He might as well have taken me to the end of the earth, because it was foreign to me. I didn't understand it. So also just having the opportunity to experience something more than once, because the more we went back, and when we drove from his place of work to Osgood, it was only about 25 minutes.
Yeah.
And so it was actually almost half of what it was taking him coming from Aylmer.
Now, it was long when we came from Aylmer to there. And I think that was confused our sense of time, because when we did that, it was significantly longer.
Right. So doing it more than once. So there's some little insights. I'm hoping you're just picking up all the little pieces as we're going through this. Is how do I figure it out? What am I looking for? What are the clues? Well, the clues is it's taking you too long to get where you want to get. That's one of them. And then doing the drive more than once, like going back quite a few times to make sure that it is what you think it is. Because my perspective was off. I thought I was lost and in the middle of nowhere. And yet it was almost half the driving time.
Yep. Do you remember the reason Osgood clinched it?
I do remember.
Do you?
I do. So we were standing outside waiting for a realtor to let us into a house, because they would only let one couple in at a time, and there was already somebody in the home looking at it. And so we were waiting to get in to see this house at an open house. And we were playing outside with our little girl at the time, who was about 2, and people were saying hello to her, and she was saying hi back, and she just felt comfortable. And we hadn't really seen that same experience. Although we lived in a lovely community in Aylmer, it was the friendliness of the village and the people in the village that made me go, I kind of feel like I'm at home.
That's interesting, because that's not the reason I had.
Okay, well, isn't that perfect?
Yeah.
That's what I remember.
Well, we were on the street, and yes, people were talking as they'd walk by.
Yeah.
And we waited 20 minutes to go into the house.
Yeah.
And not a single car drove down the street in that 20 minutes. And compared to where we lived, we were a fairly busy feeder street. You're always worried about your child going out on the road. And it had a very small backyard because it was a townhome. And the properties there had huge backyards. and very little traffic on the residential streets.
Yeah.
And that was my reasoning for saying, hey, let's look at Osgood and a garage.
Right. Ken wanted a garage.
Well, we were going to upgrade the house, right? When you're going to move, our goal then, we'd gotten some raises, even though we'd only been in the house for a year and a half or so, and the value had gone up slightly, so we had a little more equity to bring to the next house.
Yep.
And our income had gone up. We got better jobs. So we were actually able to afford a little more. And also interest rates had gone down,
right,
which increases affordability.
Right. So is your property size big enough? Do you need more amenities both in the house and in the village? And the other great news is we could walk to a whole lot of stuff in the village, which didn't become overly important for about 4 or 5, maybe 6 years, and yet it became really important. So just be thinking about not just in the moment, but for your foreseeable future, whatever your sort of 5-year, 10-year, 15-year plan is, because in our case, we stayed there for 15 years. And the great news is it served us beautifully when our kids were old enough to go to the skating rink on their own. The two of them would go and have some fun. They could go hang out with friends because it was safe and it was a tight-knit community. So each person, you as somebody that may be thinking, well, I don't want a tight-knit little community. No, and yet there are reasons for you that would make it the right place to call home. Maybe having easy commute on the bus, maybe convenience into the city, because we had a career in real estate where we were driving everywhere we needed to go. It would be pretty awkward to show homes to people taking a bus somewhere. Not that it couldn't be done, but it would be pretty awkward bussing around with your clients. And so we really needed to be in a car anyway. So if we were going to drive from home to where our clients were, it really didn't matter where we lived because it would take about the same amount of time.
Mm-hmm. So we lived there for 15 years.
We did.
Which I guess is fairly normal. They say some people move every 7 years.
On average, right? But I think it's getting longer.
For a real estate agent, that's pretty long because we see a lot of houses get tempted, you know.
Yeah, I see some really nice homes.
And then we moved to Greeley after 15 years. Now let's see. Why did we move to Greeley? Let's see if we're on the same page or we have different reasons again.
That was pretty funny. So for the second, for that move, we kind of saw it a little differently, except a lot of our reasons were the same. And the impetus for liking that community were different. Mm-hmm. Our reasons were, I didn't want the garage. I didn't really care. But anyway, I did like the idea of privacy and more room for the kids. And we had put a great big hedge in to make it private. And it was a safe place for the kids to grow up. So safety may be one of those reasons that you're thinking about. Mm-hmm. The schools
were great too.
The schools were fantastic. And then the next move became about really having somewhere that was a little closer to the offices that we were working from at that time.
And closer to the chiropractor. We were going there 3 times a week.
Yeah, because the kids had some chiropractic challenges, so we were running.
And then drive them back to go to school and then back into the city.
Right.
It was getting long.
It was. So we wanted a shorter commute for the activities and the things that we needed to be doing at that season in life. Mm-hmm. So that was definitely one of them. We also kind of liked the idea of having another new home. And Ken had become actually a new home warranty builder at the time. Mm-hmm. And so we kind of wanted to build our own home after helping lots of clients build custom homes and had been doing that for a lot of years. So we kind of had that new house bug. And so that was part of the impetus. And doing so in Greeley instead of Osgood at that time was just the lots were almost the same price, except the property values were higher in Greeley. So we were going to go for a little more space, which with 2 older teens at that point, mid-age teens, we wanted more room
so we built
inside.
A bigger house,
so
bigger garage.
Yeah, bigger house, bigger garage.
And part of it was, you know what, we were very frugal, and we paid off our mortgage in 15 years.
Right.
At the Osgood house, so we had no mortgage.
Right.
And sometimes when you free up all your capital, you want something a little bit bigger, shinier, better. It's not necessarily right or wrong, just just what happened for us.
And we had also, during those 15 years of paying off our mortgage and living in the Osgood house, we'd upgraded it a fair bit. We'd made it our own. We loved it. And yet the commute was probably still the biggest driving force.
That was the reason for starting to look.
Right. And then we also had bought a bunch of investment properties along the way. So we've been able to purchase properties that now others were paying the mortgage for and having a great roof over their head and building our wealth. So we actually had access to more money, so we didn't even have to get that big a mortgage moving into the Greeley house.
Yeah. And you know what? Each case is very unique. And you might be saying to yourself, well, I fit into these or I don't fit into these. I wonder what I should do. We're delighted to have a phone consult with you. Just a quick phone call. We'll ask you a few questions. We'll get a sense of where you're at. And then we'll decide together if it's a good fit for us to meet in person and do a full-on consultation on whether it's the right thing to move or not. And if it's not a good fit to meet, then the phone call's been great. We're happy to have connected with you.
And just help you get a little bit of clarity, right? Yeah. It's really about just getting clarity and sometimes having that third party ask the questions. I had a client just the other day send me an email saying, you know, Yetta, thank you. You called me, or I called, I think we were back and forth. We were having a conversation. She goes, we really do want to find a house. We've got about 18-month window where it makes the most sense for us to make a move. And we've been looking for 2 years already. Can't find anything. And I said, I know, we've been casually looking and you love the sites where you can check for homes and staying abreast and just nothing. And we had them set up on a custom search. And I said, let's just go a little deeper because the window's now kind of 18 months.
Okay, don't give it away. That's coming up in an upcoming show.
I know it is. And yet the beauty was we were able to have a conversation and she got clarity and she will come and share the insights that she got and why it was so helpful. But at the end of the day, in this particular case, and in many other cases, maybe I won't say in this case, in many cases, what happens after that conversation is the decision is we don't need to move. It's not time to make a move.
And that's okay with us.
That's great.
Either way.
Because clarity is like incredibly powerful. When you know whether it is yes or no, then just be committed to that answer. And either one is great. Because prior to making that move after 15 years in Osgood, we had gone through the process of thinking it might be time, probably 3 times, and then deciding it wasn't. Right? So
but
just getting clarity 15 years later.
And then we spent 14 years, right?
12.
12
that's
years?
Okay.
Sorry, 12 years. Yetta's my timekeeper.
I am a timekeeper.
12 years in Greeley.
Yeah.
And then we saw a house. And this one wasn't particular, hey, we're thinking of moving. We always said we'd like to live in Manotick.
Yes.
But this one was really one of those ones that grabbed us by the neck and said, hey, what about me? What about me?
Right. And so the reasons there were, we were worried about our parents, my parents in particular. They were getting older and had had some health scares. And so it had an in-law suite. So that just seemed really brilliant. It was kind of like future-proofing the house at a time where there was no stress to do it. Yep. And again, the mortgage had been paid off. So it made sense from it was okay to spend a little bit more because there was not any monthly
in this case,
outlay.
It wasn't going to cost us anymore because we could rent the apartment on the side, the in-law suite. So it didn't really cost us anything more to move to Manotick in a bigger home. We could walk to amenities in Manotick. It had a lot more amenities than Greeley did.
Right.
And yeah, and it was also, I don't know if you remember this, but you didn't like the house when we saw it, and yet you liked what potential it had and what we could do to it. And since we've been builders and renovators and love doing that kind of stuff, we had just the excitement of changing it and making it our own.
Yeah, I can remember the shock still. I walked through the house and I tore it apart. We weren't even looking at it initially for ourselves. We had seen it because we were doing some evaluation for a client of ours and then thought, this looks like an opportunity. So we took the kids with us to see it. I mean, they already had their own homes and already families and all that, and yet we thought it'd be kind of fun to show it to them, given we're all in the business. And so they came with us, and I walked through, and I didn't like. And then we walked out the front door after we were confused, because the floor plan, and especially in the lower level, was very confusing. Still kind of is, except I'm used to it. And so we came out of the house, and I said to Ken, "That's awful, huh?" He goes, "Yeah." And I said, "Put an offer in." He goes, "What?" I said, "Yeah, because I can see the potential of making it what we want. It works for my parents, because we were kind of afraid at that point about what might happen to Dad. And it just fit everything. Mm-hmm. And it didn't increase our expenses, which was kind of exciting." So sometimes if you're thinking about, well, I have to spend more money to move to a bigger house, maybe not. Maybe it is more on the front end. And yet if it has an in-law apartment or the potential to rent out rooms or space, it may actually cost you less to live there. Whereas our previous house, they would have had to been living in our space. And although we had families live with us often, it wasn't as conducive.
Yeah, and so the next move.
Right.
Because we've been there 4 years, and we're not intending to move right now. And yet it could be a lifestyle change to a waterfront property or a condo for lack of maintenance and all that kind of stuff. Right. It could be to get closer to family, although we're pretty close now. Mm-hmm. And hopefully not this one. This reason, fortunately, has not really affected us, although we help many families that do run into this, and that's financial stress. Right. Where things change, the career's gotten changed, the job got released, or health changed, the money's not there anymore, and it's just too financially stressful to keep a property, paying the bills or not being able to pay the bills. Right. And so that's a great reason to move as well. And sometimes it's stairs, the mobility challenges, or maintenance, or even just it's too much space outside, or it's not enough space outside, or we don't really want to deal with septic issues and well issues, and we've been in the country and now more suburban lifestyle is better. So just thinking about all the different aspects of living in space, and hopefully this list, if you paid attention, there's probably about 25 different items that we ran through that would give you yeah, that's the reasons. And thinking about the weight, there was a previous show we did a little while ago, which I would encourage you to go back and listen to or watch, that just talked about how do you weight all these different elements to know if this is the time to make a move. Yeah, so thriving in your home and life. We are excited to be your partners in moving forward.